The mystery we're going to talk about today is unsettling. It is very bizarre with no answers almost 78 years later. Imagine a tragic fire destroying a family home, but thankfully all the occupants got out safely. Or did they? Let's talk about Ricky Jean Bryant. I want to say first off, with the case being this old, research was a challenge. There was a very informative page on Uncovered, as well as some old and current newspaper articles. Jeannie's surviving siblings were interviewed for some of them, and I'll be using mostly their thoughts and memories to put the story together. I also recorded a podcast with my friend Ed Denzel for his Unfound podcast earlier this year, where we talk about this case. You can find it where you listen to your podcast, as well as a YouTube video on it titled Ricky Jean Bryant Children's Stories. Ricky Jean Bryant was born on November 11th, 1945, and lived in Mauston, Wisconsin. She was the daughter of Raymond and Opal Bryant. She had 3 siblings, Forrest, Elizabeth, and Sharon. Her grandparents were Casper and Helen Halverson. The family all lived at a farm 3 miles outside of Mauston. Ricky Jean was affectionately referred to by her family as Jeannie. Monday, December 19, 1946, would start as a normal weekday for the Bryant family. Raymond Bryant was a truck driver on a run to Chicago. The mother of the children, Opal Bryant, was working at a nearby garment factory. Sharon Bryant was 9 years old and studying at a nearby school. Remaining in the home that day were grandparents Casper and Helen Halverson, siblings Forrest 5, Elizabeth 18 months, and Jeannie 4. Then something shocking would happen that afternoon that would change this family forever. Around 3 p.m. that Monday, a horrible fire broke out at the farmhouse. There is no mention anywhere of a cause or even where in the home it started, but it appeared to be a strong blaze. We have 2 different accounts of what happened that day, and strangely enough, they differ considerably. Let's first talk about what 5-year-old Forrest Bryant remembers about that fateful day. He said that he was taken out of the home with his 2 siblings, Elizabeth and Jeannie. His grandmother instructs him to stay out in the yard and keep an eye on the girls while she goes in to rescue their grandfather. Forrest then says that a tall woman with blonde hair pulls up to the burning home in a fancy car. She instructs Forrest to go to the neighbor's house for help. Not the nearby neighbor, but to go to the neighbor's down the road. Forrest did as he was told and soon returned. But when he arrived back at the home, something was different. His little sister Jeannie was nowhere to be found. Now the grandmother, Helen Halverson, has a story that differs greatly from her grandson's. She claims that she took Forrest and Elizabeth outside and ran back in to find Jeannie. She said she ran through the house screaming her name, but saw no sign of her granddaughter. She then put a ladder up to the window of the 2nd floor. She was said to have carried down her husband Casper, who was handicapped, from a 2nd-story bedroom on a ladder. He was hospitalized with painful but not serious burns. Later that afternoon, the oldest sister, Sharon, remembers her mother picking her up from school. Opal Bryant strangely tells her daughter that Jeannie is an angel now and instructs her daughter to never mention her name again. We also have a 3rd accounting of what happened that day. It is the neighbor that Forrest went to for help that afternoon. When Irene Carlson got the news from Forrest about the fire, she returned with him to the house. She put Forrest and Elizabeth in the family car and went inside to look for Jeannie. She said that Helen Halverson was in the kitchen collecting canned goods. Helen told her Jeannie was gone. Irene continued to search the house, crying and looking for Jeannie. Helen told Irene to stop looking and help by getting her fur coat out of the house. Then later she told Irene Carlson to stop worrying because Jeannie was with relatives. The fire department did put the fire out, and there was an extensive search for Jeannie. It was reported that one firefighter claimed he heard screams coming from the blaze. Volunteers also came in and searched. At one point, there were a few possible bone fragments found. They were sent away to the lab, however, and found not to be human remains. Jeannie's father, Raymond, even searched the house 3 times himself for his missing daughter and found nothing. He doesn't think his daughter died in the fire that day. Really, nothing more happened in regards to this case after the search for Jeannie was completed. The siblings say they were not to mention their missing sister except Christmas that year, just 6 days after the fire, when they put the star on the Christmas tree and told them Jeannie was a star in heaven. There was no death certificate or funeral for Jeannie. She was just gone. It appears that several years later, Raymond and Opal would welcome another child to the family. Their daughter, Sondrea Bryant, was born in December of 1953. Then 10 years after the fire, Raymond and Opal Bryant divorced. Opal took Elizabeth, and I believe Sondrea as well, and moved to Washington State. She reportedly told her children, Sharon and Forrest, to live with their father Raymond because they were too much like their father. Opal Bryant would sometimes come to visit her children that stayed in Wisconsin. Sharon remembers that her mother would come and get her. They would go to Minnesota, and she would drop Sharon off at relatives for days, telling no one where she was going. Many years after Jeannie's disappearance, her mother decided to get her a headstone at a cemetery in Iowa where her father was buried. Opal wanted her children to visit their sister's grave to say goodbye, but they could not bring themselves to do so. In 1985, the 3 remaining siblings met back up in the area for a visit. They started to compare notes and put together all the suspicious things concerning their sister's disappearance. Could there be more to their sister's fate than dying in a house fire? Here are some of the noteworthy things that gave the siblings pause. First off, they were never allowed to speak of their sister. The comments the grandmother made the day of the fire that Jeannie was with relatives were hard to fathom. The mysterious woman pulling up during the fire. They also wondered when their mother would drop the children off at relatives for days at a time if she was secretly going to see their sister. Something else interesting is that Elizabeth also said that before the fire, her mother and grandmother had no money, no insurance on the house either. It seemed after the fire they had more money, with her mother even buying a fur coat. In 2005, the siblings gave their story and their concerns to the Juneau County Sheriff's Department. Their sister's disappearance was then officially reopened. Unfortunately, they did learn that the records associated with the disappearance and the fire were destroyed in a flood in 2000. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has also now published an age-progressed photo of what Jeannie would look like in more recent years. In 2018, after speaking with a relative, the siblings' suspicions concerning their sister's disappearance would ramp up even more. By this time, their parents and grandparents were all deceased. They met with Lois Kane, a second cousin of their mother's. She had some thoughts on their sister's disappearance that shocked them all. Lois Kane was close with their mother growing up and gave some more information on her past. She told the siblings that Jeannie did not die in the fire. She made the cryptic comment to keep looking and they'd be surprised at what they'd find. While looking through a scrapbook with her family, Lois did recognize a man who looked like someone Opal had maintained a relationship with for years, even before the Bryants split up. This man also had a daughter around Jeannie's age. They were able to eventually do a DNA test on this unnamed woman, and it showed that she was not Jeannie. Lois Kane's comments gave another possible theory. Is there a chance that Jeannie wasn't Raymond Bryant's biological child? It is mentioned by her own children that Opal Bryant had a habit for leaving for periods of time when no one knew her whereabouts. The siblings think that Jeannie could have been taken that day, but possibly by prearrangement, not as a kidnapping. Is it possible the mysterious woman took Jeannie? Or could Jeannie have been sold to people? This might explain the appearance of money that the siblings talked about after the fire. So as far as my thoughts on this case, where do I start? The grandmother and mother seem questionable from day one. They certainly did not act like someone who was grieving the loss of a child. They just seemed to want to erase Jeannie from her family's memory. I don't think the grandparents started the fire because the grandmother risked her life to get her husband out. But the mysterious lady showing up at just the time of the house fire is so suspicious. I had also considered a baby broker type abduction and similar to Georgia Tan, but that's certainly just speculation on my part. Another theory to put forth, and is similar to the one that has come up in regards to the Joan Gay Croft disappearance as well, that this person saw the child was in a distressful situation with her house being burned down and took her to give her a good life. I have a hard time buying that because she left 18-month-old Elizabeth in the yard alone while Forrest went to help. Could Jeannie have been the target and the reason the unknown lady showed up? It was stated she told Forrest to not go to the nearby neighbor's house as their phone didn't work, but directed him to a house farther down the road. Did she really know the neighbor's phone didn't work? And if so, how? Or was it simply making it so Forrest would be gone long enough for her to take Jeannie? There is no obvious answer to this case, but I tend to think that Jeannie was taken that day and did not perish in the house fire. The fire started during the day and help was called for quickly, so I don't think the fire would have been intense enough to completely incinerate human remains. Not even small human bones were found after repeated searches. I certainly think the mysterious lady played a role in her disappearance. I do understand that a 5-year-old could have a precarious memory, but given the traumatic events of that day, I think it would stay with him. Plus, the neighbor's story seemed to go along more with his account than his grandmother's. So much speculation in this story, and so few actual answers in this tragic case. Sadly, Forrest passed away in 2017, Sharon in 2020, and Sandrea would pass away in 2021. Jeannie's sister Elizabeth is now her only surviving sibling. Elizabeth did state in a newspaper article, "You just don't lose a life. I still feel in my heart that we're going to find her before we die." Hopefully she can get some answers while she is on this earth. The family who never forgot Ricky Jean Bryant deserves to know whether she was taken or trapped. I recently learned of another case that I wanted to give some attention to. You would think that a child going missing in a house fire would be a rare occurrence, but I do want to talk about another disappearance that has some surprising similarities to the Ricky Jean Bryant case. This would take place on March 6, 1984, on Memorial Drive in the Algiers neighborhood of New Orleans. Aubrey and Johnny Mae Brown lived in a home there with their 10 children. The children remember their childhood fondly, saying it was full of fun and also chaotic. The family was excited about the upcoming Mardi Gras, and the children remember going to bed early that night in preparation for it. At about 3 a.m., the family awoke to flames swallowing up their home. There was sheer panic as the mom was yelling that her babies were inside, while the father threw buckets of water on the house. People from all over the neighborhood would come to help the family during this horrific event. The fire was eventually put out, but sadly 2 children would perish in the fire. 4-year-old Aubrey Jr. and 2-year-old Kevin. They were said to be found huddling together in the family's living room. 7 of the Brown children were accounted for and escaped the fire safely. But there was one child that remained unaccounted for. 3-year-old Ramona Brown had gone missing the night of the fire. I'm sure at first the family didn't know what to think. The first explanation was that she perished in the flames. However, no one, not even the firefighters, think that is the case. Ramona would have been small in stature at only 3 years old, but the fire was attended to quickly and it wasn't thought hot enough to incinerate bones. Despite searches in the debris, no human remains were found except the 2 little boys. But if Ramona did not die in the fire, where was she? Soon after the fire, one of the Browns' children, 6-year-old Simona, had an interesting story to tell her parents. She told them that she saw a biracial couple pull up in their car offering help. She also claims to have seen Ramona climb into the unknown couple's car. Simona described the couple's car as a gold Cadillac with wings. However, after telling her parents that story, no doubt being traumatized from that night, she would go into a shell and not talk about it for a few years. Ramona Brown would never be far from her parents' or siblings' minds. They desperately wanted to know what became of their sibling and to be reunited with her. Then 34 years after the fire, Simona found the strength and with the encouragement of her siblings to relive that painful incident in her life once again. In 2018, she would meet with Detective Lamar Lewis of the New Orleans Police Department to talk about her missing sister. She reiterated the same memories that she shared with her parents after the fire. She is certain that she was holding Ramona's hand when the car pulled up and the couple offered to help watch Ramona. She then watched her sister climb into their car. The couple was older, with the man being African American, having short hair and a slim build. The woman was white with long hair and a thin build. They were driving a gold Cadillac, and Ramona described it as having wings on the back. It is also mentioned that the grandmother of the children received strange phone calls soon after the fire, with no one speaking on the other end. The family had wondered if it was Ramona or her abductors. New Orleans police are determined to find a resolution in this case. They tend to think, along with the family, that Ramona was abducted that night. They have released an age-progressed picture of what she would look like at age 42 to help in their search for her. I think this is one of the more likely cases of an abduction than perished in the fire. With the fire being tended to so quickly, and all of the other 11 people in the home being accounted for, it doesn't seem likely that Ramona's body would be missed in the rubble. I also don't think 6-year-old Simona would make up the story of the couple whom her sister left with, and I can't think of a plausible reason why she would. There is something in this story that we sadly don't find often in these cold cases, and that is hope. With the age-progressed photo and her story being put out there, the Brown siblings have hope that their sister is alive and well and they can be reunited with her one day. They deserve answers, and this is another case where we've still yet to learn whether a little girl was taken or trapped. That concludes my podcast on the disappearance of Ricky Jean Bryant and Ramona Brown. If you enjoyed it, please leave me a rating or review where you listen to your podcast. You can listen to me on Spotify, Amazon Radio, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio under one word, Lost and Found Podcast. I also now have a Patreon channel with podcasts on some rare cases that you will only find on there. You can find my channel at patreon.com/lostandfoundpodcast. This month I released an exclusive podcast on Deborah Poe with information you won't read anywhere else on the internet, as well as a mini podcast on the bizarre disappearance of Tim Molnar. You can also reach me by email at lostandfoundpodcast@yahoo. And remember that cold cases stay cold because their story stops getting told.